Hello everyone. Thanks for joining us today for this live presentation of Boomerang 2.0. Today we'll look at how Boomerang can migrate virtual machines and workloads to and from Amazon Web Services and Microsoft Azure. So what is Boomerang? Boomerang lets you easily replicate your virtual machines and workloads to low-cost cloud storage. Virtual machines can then be deployed to Azure or AWS computing clouds for failover, DR testing, or even permanent migration. So the thing that's unique about this is that computing charges for the cloud service providers only occur when the virtual machines are actively running in the cloud. So this allows our customers to use low-cost cloud storage as a target for the replicated VMs without incurring costs for compute. With Boomerang 2.0, we've introduced the support for Microsoft Azure. So again, it comes down to only paying for compute resources when you need to. So when you need to spin up your environment, you need to verify that things are working, only at that time are you going to pay for the expensive compute costs right behind those third-party clouds. So this gives you a chance to still use that cheaper storage for your snapshots, but yet, again, pay for compute only when necessary. So there's two primary use cases for the Boomerang product, migration and disaster recovery. Some customers will use Boomerang as a way to migrate workloads to the cloud service providers in order to reduce operational costs. Others use Boomerang to provide an inexpensive option for disaster recovery. Now, our partners will often use Boomerang to again, migrate customer environments between data centers, or even as a way to scale out and up as their own infrastructure changes. So as they take on more and more customers and their infrastructure needs change, they can take those workloads and migrate them to different clouds to ease their transitioning. But with that said, let's go ahead and get started. We'll take a look at the interface and take a look at how we can make this work here. Let me exit the full screen on this. So what we're looking at in the environment is a demonstration environment. I work for the Unitrends, of course, and I managed a couple of the demo labs that we use for demonstrations. And this particular lab is in Columbia, South Carolina, and we're looking at a protection group dashboard for the Boomerang product. We'll see that we have two protection group dashboards defined here, AWS Boomerang and Azure Boomerang. So in each one of these protection groups, I have defined virtual machines that we're protecting, and that's what we're going to be deploying up into those third-party cloud. So the first tab again points to the Boomerang Appliance. The second tab is actually my EC2 portal, or my dashboard for AWS. And I can see here that I currently have two virtual machines running in AWS. The third tab here is my Microsoft Azure account, and we'll go back here to the Refresh tab, and we'll see that we have currently, we'll see if we have any virtual machines currently running here. Nope, okay. So nothing is running there currently. The fourth tab is my vSphere web client, and this has the Boomerang Appliance highlighted currently. So the Boomerang Appliance will use 2 CPUs, 6 gigs of RAM, and 16 gigs of storage. Each instance of the software will protect around 40 to 50 virtual machines. So notice I wouldn't need to deploy the Boomerang Appliance on a per host basis, right? So I put one appliance in there, and that gives me protection for 40 to 50 VMs. Above the Boomerang Appliance is the server that we'll use for testing today. That's the server 07 here. It's about 40 gig hard drive or so, decent sized server. And now that we've taken a look at that, let's go ahead and go back to the Boomerang Appliance. And I'm going to go ahead and deploy first to Azure. We're going to take two of the VMs that we're protecting. We're going to spin them up in Microsoft Azure. And we'll do that here at the beginning of the demonstration so that we can go back and take a look at it afterwards here. So I'm going to click where it says Azure Boomerang. And I want to go to the tab here, the button that says Deploy Now. Now, when I go and choose to deploy into Azure, it lets me choose the most recent snapshot. Now, that's the default, or I can always do the drop-down and pick the snapshot that I want to deploy from. Here under the network configuration, I can choose if I have an existing network within Azure that I want to leverage for spinning up the virtual machines. I can click that here. But next we'll see the virtual machines, and this tells us what is being recommended based on the source server's CPU and memory. So this is what Azure is saying. This is what we should use, right, when spinning up this virtual machine. These are the resources that we're going to put behind it. So you can go in and manually change that too if you'd like. So I'll go ahead and click on Deploy Now, and we'll start that deployment process now into Azure. So the Boomerang product is managed all through the web browser. You deploy the OVA, you download the OVA from our website, you deploy it to your VMware environment, and again, 2 CPUs, 6 gigs of RAM, 16 gigs of storage, and now I'll go ahead and, looks like I was muted there by the host. I'll go ahead and unmute myself. All right, I think I've been taken off mute here. Mark, if you could verify, I'd appreciate that. I'm going to go ahead and keep on going here.
Yes, you're good, Rob.
All right, thank you. All right, so as we see here on the bottom, we're deploying 2 of the servers into Azure, and it's preparing now. It's taking the snapshot that we've replicated up to our blob storage for Azure, and it's deploying that with Microsoft's resources there. But the interface for the appliance is all managed through this web browser here. We deploy the image into our VMware environment. We download the OVA from the website. We deploy it and use the web browser going forward to do all the management of it. Now here under the credential profiles is really where we do the mapping between our vCenter, our vSphere environment, and AWS or Azure. Clicking on the new credentials profile, this is where we go in and specify that information. So the vCenter server information goes in here. The destination cloud would be specified. Put in the secret access key, right, and the bucket that you're replicating your snapshots to. So for AWS, you're using the S3 bucket. For Microsoft Azure, you're using a blob storage container as the target for the replicated backup. So again, 2 of the most inexpensive options when it comes to cloud storage. And that's what it looks like with Microsoft Azure. So again, this does the mapping between the vCenter server and the Boomerang appliance and the Boomerang appliance and AWS and Azure. Other than that, here under the settings, again, it's very simple to set up the Boomerang appliance. It really takes about 10 minutes to do the deployment and go through and specify your license information. Email notifications can be set up. DNS, kind of the typical settings here. But you can also set the throttle for the bandwidth. So it won't consume all the bandwidth that you have available. Okay, I'm going back to the protection group here. Now again, this dashboard is really designed to give you a quick understanding as to what's been deployed in what environment. And you'll notice we're going to go through all the different things that we can do with the Boomerang product, but again, being able to look on the dashboard, see what's happening, see where things are deployed, makes it really easy to manage. So what I'll do first is I'll go into the AWS Boomerang protection group, and then you'll see a couple different tabs underneath. And again, it's all about kind of drilling in and seeing what's going on with the product here. I see on the Deployed Virtual Machines tab that 2 VMs are deployed into EC2. Again, we can click on the EC2 tab to see those virtual machines running there. The next tab is the last or the latest deployment. And this is nice because I can go here and quickly see how long it took last time I deployed this protection group in AWS. So in this case, it took 35 minutes to deploy the snapshots that were in the S3 bucket into EC2, right, into the computing cloud. And it also tells me here the cloud formation template that I used when I did that conversion. Some nice little tabs, links built into the product here that will go right to the knowledge base articles here. Now a copyback, what's happening during a copyback is we're actually creating a new AMI within AWS so that we can export the snapshot that we generate as part of initiating the copyback down to our local environment. So the thing, as the Boomerang name applies, or kind of implies here, is that you use the Boomerang product to get your virtual machines into a third-party cloud, but now you can also pull them back down again. And that's one of the things that makes the product very unique. Often it's very easy to get data into those clouds, but retrieving it again can be a little more difficult. So what we do then is when we start this last copyback, or this copyback process, we initiate a snapshot within AWS, and now that snapshot is copied down to our local environment. So changes that happen on the VMs running in the cloud will be pulled back down to the VMware environment. And it doesn't have to go back to the same VMware environment. It's important to know you can pull it down to any VMware environment. And then we also have the tab here for the last restore. Now restore is basically creating an empty virtual disk in your local VMware environment and then pulling down the replicated data that you have up in the cloud to that virtual disk. So it's, again, you just go up and pick the snapshot that you want to use and it pulls that information back. So what I think I'll do now is I think I'll start a copyback process here in AWS so that we can show what takes place in EC2 when that copyback process is started. So going and diving into the protection group, I'll see the actions that I can do with the protection group here on the right-hand side. So replicate, now that uses the VADP within VMware to create snapshots of the virtual machines. And we looked at deploy already, so let's go ahead and go right into the copyback. So now in the copyback tab, I'll see the virtual machines that are currently running in AWS. And I'll go ahead and select on the one that I want to copy back. Here I'll specify within the VMware environment what data center I want to leverage, which host, as well as the data stores that I want to use for this machine. And I'll put this on my test network. And I'll go ahead and start that copyback. So now at this point, let's go ahead and check on our deployment to Azure. Go ahead and refresh our dashboard here. And we'll see here that it's actually going through and taking the virtual disk for the virtual machine and converting those. Let's go back into Microsoft Azure here and we'll refresh. And what you see here, it might be a little small on your screen, but it's a VHD converter, right? So it's taking the VMDK and converting it into a VHD. And we'll just give that a few more minutes as it does this thing here. So going back to the Boomerang tag, one thing I really like about the product is it's very simple to go and see what all's been occurring, right? If I go here within the protection group activity, it shows me everything here, whether it's replications or deployments or copybacks. And I can quickly go and look at the details here. So for an example, this restore, you can see what time it was started, what time it completed. If I want to go up to the copybacks, I'll go view details here. Again, see what time I started, what time I finished. And here I'll look at the last deployment, view details here. And it took, in this case, 12 minutes and 21 seconds to take my virtual machines and spin them up in Microsoft Azure from the most recent snapshot. Now the virtual machine that we're using for a test here, I'll go ahead and I have a remote desktop connection into it, so I'll switch over to that now. I created this directory just a little while ago at 10:34 a.m. I put a file in it so that we can tell once we spun up the server in Azure, right, we can see that those changes will be there. So just pointing that out real quick here. We can go ahead and power this down since we won't need it anymore. I was disconnected. So now let's go ahead and take a look at some more of the deployment options because again this is a real strength of the product. Let's go in here to AWS and we'll look at the deployment tab here. Now one thing to point out here, if I were to take all the default settings here for this protection group, you'll note that I can do a one-click deploy. So if I click on deploy now, that's all I have to do at this point. It'll just go through and use all the settings that we have in here as the defaults, and I'll be able to make that happen quickly here. But again, going back, you can go to the snapshot of your choice, use existing virtual private clouds within AWS. Again, another nice feature. And here you can allocate elastic IP addresses so that those machines will be available publicly. Here under the instance launch order, you can click and specify the order of the virtual machines that you want spun up. So you would spin up your domain controllers, of course, right before your application servers, as an example. One thing that's nice, too, is you can also do the conversion so that you can spin up the virtual machines later. So that's another option that you have here on the Deploy tab. Again, here for the restore, simply pick the snapshot that you want to restore. Select the VMs that you want brought back down. Select your data center, again your host, data store, and your network, of course. If we click on here where it says using restore, what's nice about the restore option is the deployed VM will not have any effect on the snapshot or the restored VM, right? So this, unlike the copyback procedure where you're creating a snapshot of the VM that's currently running in the cloud, here you're simply just picking the snapshot that you want brought back down. We'll go back here to my protection tab. And we'll see here that the last copyback that I started is currently in progress right now. It's extracting from EC2 a snapshot for the VM that we're protecting, that we're pulling down. Here the AMI is created, and then it will export the snapshot and download it to VMware. So if we go back to the EC2 tab and hit refresh, we'll see now that we have a third, right, another AMI that's dedicated to exporting, right, that snapshot so that we can get it downloaded very quickly. Now, I'm not using any kind of direct connect in the environment, right, anything that would really speed that process up, but that is something that you could do there. I'll go back here to the Boomerang tab. We'll minimize this one and look into our Azure Boomerang tab. I'll go here where it says All Activity. Viewing details here. I see that it took us about 12 minutes and 52 seconds to deploy those virtual machines in Microsoft Azure. And here we'll see the instance that was used. And it gives us really our stack information, right, for Microsoft Azure. So let's go to the Azure tab. I'll hit refresh. And now we'll see that I have two virtual machines happily running here within Azure. And so that we can verify the test, I'll go ahead and click on Server 07. Now I'll go where it says IP addresses, and I'll just make this address public so I can access it here. And we'll just give this a minute as let Microsoft do its thing here. It'll give us a message once it's updated that IP address. Okay, successfully updated the IP address. Now we should be able to use this information to access this VM. I'll go ahead and copy this IP address here. And I'll put it into my remote desktop client here. Okay, I'll go ahead and save that, and we'll go ahead and launch the remote desktop into that server. Okay, and here's the directory that I created. And the server is actually running IIS and a bunch of other services here. So it's just taking a few minutes to get its feet under itself here. Now, the thing about the Boomerang product is that it doesn't take a high level of knowledge when it comes to the third-party cloud. You don't have to be an Azure expert or an AWS expert to use the product. And again, for a lot of our customers, this provides a very inexpensive option when it comes to protecting their virtual machines, having your data replicated to the cloud, right, someplace off-site. But yet being able to take it a step further and activate it or spin up your virtual machines should something happen at your primary location. So let's go back to the dashboard. Now at this point, I'll go ahead and start tearing down my machines. At this point, I've done my test, right, or maybe it's a quarterly test where you have to spin up your servers and prove that everything's accessible. So at this point, we want to tear down those resources, right? So we're not going to continue to pay for those compute charges. So here, I'll go back to my Boomerang AWS. Click on my Deployment tab. Actually, I'll go into the Protection Group Activity. So this is, again, a nice place that you can just go to see everything that's happening. Go to my last deployment here where it says View Details. And I can click here on Undeploy to now tear down those instances running in AWS. I'm actually going to let that one run a little bit longer, and we'll go back and tear down the Azure VMs. So now here I can go into the stack information to click on Undeploy, or I can also do that from the dashboard. So I'll go back and show you that. Here where it says 2 VMs are deployed, click on the cloud. Now I see the Undeploy option here. Click on Undeploy. It asks me to confirm that. I'll click on the checkbox to confirm. Now it tells me here on the right-hand corner that it's undeploying those VMs. We can go ahead and check the box there. Go back to the Azure tab. Click on my virtual machines, hit refresh. And we'll see that one of them's already been powered off. And give it a couple more minutes here, and the other machine will also be powered off here. So let's check on the copyback process here. And it looks like it's still exporting that snapshot from AWS. But what it does at this point is it creates the virtual machine with the timestamp and puts it in your vCenter environment. So here is another machine, or another instance of the machine that I copied down earlier this morning. Simply restores it back into the VMware environment. I can right-click on it and power it up. Now, I know we only have about a half hour for the demonstration, and that's really the highlights of the product. I want to leave a little bit of time for Q&A. So as we watch this copyback process complete here, is there any questions that I can help answer today? One question here is where you can obtain the Boomerang appliance. So here, if we go to the Unitrends website, under Products, you'll see Boomerang for VMware. Here you put in your information, first name, last name, phone, and you can download the virtual appliance from here. Now you do have the option of running a 30-day free trial. We also have the option of a 7-day trial if you wanted to leverage our accounts for the web provider. So if you wanted to use our AWS account, you could do that and use the product for 7 days. Or if you have your own account, and both Azure and AWS offer 30-day evaluation accounts. So you can match it up with your Boomerang 30-day trial.
So Rob, whilst we're talking, if you still have time while we're waiting for the next step to happen, we did get some questions coming in. One participant asked, I believe I saw the option to specify a specific snapshot to the cloud, but can it do all snapshots for a particular machine?
It could. You would have to choose each one of those snapshots as a deployment option. So you would have to pick that when you went to do the deployment here. We'll go ahead and look at that now.
Great. There's another question that's come in. Could this product be a realistic tool for DR replication if you are running the native AWS hypervisor versus VMware?
Right now, Boomerang is only geared for VMware. So it is specifically for VMware at this point.
Okay, great.
So for the other question mark, you would just here and basically pick the snapshot that you wanted to deploy into the computing cloud. But there's no limitations on that. I mean, you're just essentially spinning up multiple snapshots or multiple instances of the same server.
Okay. If you have time to handle a few more questions, how does Boomerang failover work if my server goes down?
If your local server goes down, you would have to go in here into the Boomerang appliance and simply click on deploy. So it's now the Boomerang appliance itself can be uploaded to AWS. So that's one option that you have, right? Is putting the appliance there itself. But yeah, you would have to go in and manually kick off that deployment. So if your Boomerang appliance is one of the virtual machines that you're protecting, you would go to EC2, log into the Boomerang appliance here, and then launch your virtual machine, the deployment, if you will, of the virtual machine from there.
Okay. Another question, can I remodel Amazon machine images back to VMware VMs if I haven't used Boomerang to create the AMI?
That's a great question. It's something that our developers are looking into, but currently, no. It would have to be a virtual machine protected by Boomerang. in order to pull it back to a VMware environment.
Okay, good. One more question. Is there an upper limit on the number of VMs or protection groups I can manage from the dashboard?
Each instance of the Boomerang appliance will protect between 40 and 50 VMs. So it's very likely in larger environments that you would have multiple Boomerang appliances. It scales around 40 to 50 VMs per appliance.
Great. Okay. I interrupted you. Do you want to continue with your demo?
No, that's pretty much it, Mark. It's a very simple product to use, very easy to deploy, even if you're not an expert in AWS or Azure. And of course, when you're finished, it's easy to undeploy and go in and tear down those instances.
That's great.
Copyback is still going on, so it's going to take a few more minutes here for that copyback.
Okay. So there are three things that people I've talked to who use Boomerang like best. One is the simplicity of doing a failover, and then, of course, the failback. It's great to be able to recover your systems within minutes or a short period of time instead of 1 or 2 days, which some other products take to really get a good recovery. The other thing is using the low-cost Amazon S3 or Azure Blob Storage really keeps the cost down low because no compute cycles are needed for DR until you actually have an outage. And of course, the license costs itself are extremely low, the lowest in the market.
It's hard. It's very, to be able to protect a VM for, say, $20 a month, and be able to pick and choose, between Azure and AWS, and to be able to compare the cost differences sometimes between running in either cloud. It's a nice option to have. And again, if you have no other option for backup and DR especially, right? This is, again, it's a very low-cost solution for that. Yes, you pay $20 a month or so per VM, but the only other cost then is the compute for when you're running the VMs, and the 3 cents a gigabyte, for an example, for S3, right? If you're using that as a target for the replicated snapshots.
Hey, in the meantime, Rob, a few more other questions have come in. Larry asks, are the network adapters available in VMware fully supported when the VM is moved to Azure or AWS? Do we need to?
Yes, they are. Yep, they are fully supported. One thing that's nice here, too, and I don't think I necessarily went into it very well here. When you do your deployment, actually, let's go back here, because what I didn't show is how to set up the VMs that you're protecting. So here on the main dashboard for the protection group here, you have the virtual machine protection tab, replication and retention scheduling, email notification recipients. So here I'll click on the drop-down and choose Modify. And what it shows me here is little icons that indicate whether or not the VM within your VMware environment is supported for AWS, and of course it would be a different list for Azure, since they both happen to support different OSs for the spin up. So here you can see the vCenter, the vSphere environment, and all the virtual machines that we're protecting. Here, of course, it puts a check box next to the one that's ready to go. And here it tells me that my secondary network adapter attached to the server may not be mapped to AWS. Right? So it just gives you that heads up. Now you can still protect it with Boomerang, but it's just giving you that heads up. But yes, all the adapters that you would use within VMware will be supported within AWS.
That's great. And Larry also asks if other device drivers are supported, video, disks, etc.
I guess it would depend. It would have to be a virtual disk first and foremost, right? So it'd have to be a virtual disk on the virtual machine. And it really comes down, I guess it really depends on what that device is as to whether or not it would be supported.
And another question, can Boomerang coexist with on-premises backup solutions, or do they have to be separated somehow?
No, it's fully supported with other backup solutions. So there's no worry about running Boomerang in parallel to, say, a Commvault or anything else that you're using for backups.
Okay, great. So, Rob, unless you have more to talk about, we could wrap this up. And
I think that's it, Mark. Again, very simple product to use, very simple to deploy. I would recommend going out and doing the 30-day evaluation and giving a test drive.